What if I told you that the heir to one of the world's most trusted medical empires died alone, surrounded by filth, in a house where the water had been shut off for unpaid bills? What if the family whose logo symbolizes safety and sterility met their end in absolute squalor? This isn't fiction. This is the Johnson & Johnson dynasty, and this is their curse. January 4, 2010. West Hollywood, Los Angeles. An elite neighborhood sealed behind security gates. The morning silence is unnaturally thick as the maid unlocks the door to the guest house on Mulholland Drive. The air inside hits her like a wall, stuffy, cold, dead. The thermostat is off. The lights are dark. The water supply has been disconnected. In the center of the chaos, piles of garbage, unwashed dishes, clothes scattered everywhere, lies the body of Casey Johnson. She is 30 years old. She has been dead for several days, alone and undiscovered. The police report reveals the full horror: rats and debris floating in the backyard pool, a house that resembles a crack den more than a residence. But here's what makes this scene unbearable: Casey Johnson is the great-great-granddaughter of Robert Wood Johnson I, founder of Johnson & Johnson, the corporation that taught the world about sterility, hygiene, and healthcare. The irony is suffocating. The heiress of the sterility empire dies in filth. The cause of death: diabetic ketoacidosis, a complication of type 1 diabetes caused by lack of insulin. And here's the cruelest twist: Johnson & Johnson is one of the world's largest producers of diabetic medical equipment. Casey had access to the best medicine on the planet. She just didn't use it. This wasn't just the death of a socialite. This was a crime scene where the killer wasn't a person, it was a colossal fortune that corroded human souls. To understand how one of America's most powerful families arrived at this moment, we must travel back 30 years to Princeton, New Jersey, to an estate locals called the American Versailles. Yasna Polana. This is where the drama unfolded that shattered the Johnson dynasty forever. At the center, an 87-year-old dying patriarch, his young Polish maid turned wife, and 4 rejected children locked in the most expensive inheritance battle in American legal history. The stakes: a $500 million fortune. But more than that, control over reality itself. Before we enter that mansion of madness, you need to understand what the Johnson heirs inherited. It wasn't just money. It was an ideology built on blood, sterility, and ruthless competition. 1886, New Brunswick, New Jersey. 3 brothers, Robert, James, and Edward Meade Johnson, make a decision that will revolutionize medicine. Inspired by Sir Joseph Lister's lectures on antisepsis, they create a company with one mission: save lives by destroying microbes. At the time, surgery was a death sentence. Doctors operated in filthy coats. Instruments went unsterilized. Post-operative infection mortality reached 80%. The Johnson brothers offered the world something radical: ready-made sterile bandages. This is crucial to understand. From the very beginning, the Johnson family philosophy was built on the idea of purity. They sold sterility. They sold safety. But inside the family itself, there was no purity. The bacteria of envy and domination thrived unchecked. By mid-century, the company had become a global monster. But the real drama began in the second generation, controlled by a man the family called the General. Robert Wood Johnson II, the founder's son, a man with a bulldog jaw and dictator's temperament, took control in 1932. He transformed the family business into an international empire. He served in Washington during World War II, earning the rank of brigadier general, and he brought military discipline into the corporation. The general wrote Johnson & Johnson's famous credo, carved in stone at headquarters: "Our first responsibility is to doctors, nurses, and patients." Shareholders were mentioned last. Brilliant PR. But in his personal life, the general practiced social Darwinism. He despised weakness, hated laziness, and most of all, he despised his younger brother, J. Seward Johnson I. Born in 1895, Seward was the general's opposite. Where Robert was a warrior and builder, Seward was a hedonist and fugitive. He suffered from dyslexia as a child, seen as mental retardation in that era. His father and brother openly called him a loser. That psychological wound defined his entire life. Seward didn't want to manage the company. He wanted to be left alone. While the general conquered markets across Europe and Asia, Seward spent his gigantic dividends on art, purebred cattle, and oceanography. He was a company director in name only, a sinecure. His true passion was the sea. On his yacht, he was captain. No one could call him the stupid brother there. But there was one detail that made Seward dangerous: money. In 1944, the family created complex trust funds to avoid taxes and maintain share control. These trusts were legal fortresses, guaranteeing that Seward and his children would receive astronomical sums regardless of talent, effort, or morality. By the late 1960s, Seward's fortune was worth hundreds of millions, billions in today's terms. Outwardly, he lived the life of American aristocracy. He had a proper wife, Esther Underwood, from high society. They had 4 children: Mary Leah, Elaine, Jennifer, and James Seward Jr. Christmas cards, estates in New Jersey and Florida, exclusive clubs, the perfect picture. Behind closed doors, icy emptiness. Seward was an emotional invalid. He feared his own children, didn't know what to say to them, and preferred buying them off with checks. The children grew up in the shadow of 2 giants, the tyrannical uncle who saw them as spoiled trust fund brats, and an absent father always busy with yachts and phobias. And Seward had many phobias. He was terrified of kidnapping. After the Lindbergh baby story in the 1930s, his fear became obsession. He carried a weapon, installed cutting-edge alarms, built nuclear bunkers. This is key to understanding his psychology. Seward Johnson saw the world as hostile. His wealth wasn't a tool for creation, it was a wall to hide behind. By 1968, Seward was 73. The general had died, leaving Seward the sole patriarch. But he felt no triumph. Only fatigue. His marriage to Esther was a formality. His children were grown, waiting for the inheritance, drowning in the typical problems of gilded youth: scandals, drugs. Seward was fabulously rich but absolutely lonely. A king without a kingdom. A man who had everything except a reason to wake up. He needed what money cannot buy but for which rich old men often pay the highest price: admiration. He needed to feel alive. May 1968. Into this vacuum of loneliness walks a woman who will change everything. Her name is Barbara Piasecka, the family calls her Basia. She's 31 years old, fresh off a plane from socialist Poland with $100 in her suitcase, a master's degree in art history, and not a word of English. The irony. Esther Johnson, Seward's wife, hires her. Esther needs a cook. Basia can't even fry an egg. But she needs work. She agrees. Thus, the future owner of $500 million begins washing dishes for people who won't even look her in the eye. But this doesn't last long. Seward notices the new maid. Basia is different. Educated. She knows art better than all his rich friends combined. She can distinguish early Renaissance from Baroque. She's fiery, emotional, direct. For Seward, used to hypocritical smiles and cold handshakes, she's pure oxygen. They begin talking. First with gestures, then broken English. Seward discovers this maid understands his soul better than the woman he's lived with for 30 years. She listens to his ocean stories. She doesn't ask for money. She admires him as a man, not as Mr. Johnson. In 1971, Seward shocks the East Coast elite. He divorces Esther and 8 days later marries his former maid. The wedding is in November 1971. The groom, 76. The bride, 34. None of Seward's 4 children attend. For them, it's not just an insult, it's a threat. The Polish fortune hunter has penetrated the Holy of Holies. But for Seward, it's a second youth. Basia becomes his guide to a world he'd always dreamed of but feared to enter: high art and extravagant luxury. She tells him he's not just an heir to a bandage manufacturer. He's a Medici of the 20th century. And he believes her. Society closes its doors to them. Elite clubs in Princeton and New York refuse the new Mrs. Johnson. They call her a vulgar upstart, laugh at her accent, whisper behind her back. So Basia makes a strategic decision: if the world won't accept them, they'll build their own world, one that will make all others fade in comparison. They decide to build a house. But not just any house. A manifesto. A declaration of independence from family, from society, from boring American moderation. They choose 140 acres in Princeton. To build their palace, Seward demolishes the old mansion already on the site, a symbolic act, destruction of the past for the future. The project is named Yasna Polana, a direct reference to Leo Tolstoy's Russian estate. Basha wants to emphasize intellectual connection with great culture, rejecting American consumerism. They hire architect Wallace Harrison, the men who designed the Metropolitan Opera and the UN headquarters. This isn't about building a cozy nest. This is about building a monument. Seward gives Basha carte blanche and a blank checkbook. Construction lasts several years and costs $30 million, hundreds of millions in today's terms. Basha personally approves every stone, rejects marble samples if they're not white enough, fires contractors who don't understand her vision. She's creating a stage for the final act of her husband's life. But here's the crack in the foundation: the higher Yasna Polana's walls rise, the thicker the wall between Seward and his children becomes. Mary Leah, Elaine, Jennifer, and Junior watch in horror as the inheritance they consider theirs by birthright turns into granite, gilding, and old master paintings. Every million spent on construction is a million that won't go to them. Basha isn't just spending money, she's restructuring Seward's assets. Under her influence, he begins selling Johnson & Johnson shares, what the general forbade under threat of curse, to buy art. She tells him, stocks are paper. Art is eternity. And they buy eternity wholesale: Raphael, Botticelli, Rembrandt, Louis XIV furniture, tapestries from European royal palaces. Seward, who felt like the stupid brother his whole life, now owns a collection museum's envy. He finally feels significant. But this greatness comes at a terrible price. Seward finds himself in complete isolation. His world narrows to architects, art dealers, and Basha. The children try to call but can't get past secretaries. By the late 1970s, when construction is complete, Seward is over 80 and diagnosed with cancer. Yasna Polana stands in all its terrifying splendor, 46,000 square feet of museum-grade coldness. It's larger than many hospitals, designed not for people but for paintings. The house has 36 rooms, but no one lives in them. Seward's children almost never cross the threshold. When they do, they feel like strangers, forced to wear special slippers to avoid scratching precious floors. This is a house where things are more important than people. Art is valued above family. Spring in Princeton is cold, but inside Yasna Polana, the temperature reaches boiling point. Seward Johnson is 87. Cancer has metastasized. His body, once commanding yachts on the open ocean, is now a fragile shell chained to a medical bed. In the last months of Seward's life, Yasna Polana becomes a fortress. Basha fires old guards, replaces staff, monitors phone lines. Access to Mr. Johnson becomes nearly impossible, even for close friends. The children, Mary Leah, Elaine, Jennifer, and Junior, try to see their father but hit a wall every time. He's sleeping. He's too weak. He doesn't want to see anyone. Imagine the humiliation: heirs to one of America's richest families forced to make appointments through their stepmother's secretary to see their dying father. And when they're allowed in, visits last minutes, with Basha always present, like a warden. The children claim their father looks drugged, disoriented, frightened. They see pleas for help in his eyes. But there's another side. Witnesses, doctors and nurses, later testify that it was Basha, not the children, who changed the old man's diapers, fed him, endured his anger and senile dementia. The children, raised with silver spoons, were squeamish about the physiology of dying. Basha, the former maid, was not. Here lies the moral ambivalence. Does the one who wipes the drool from the dying deserve billions while rightful heirs wait outside in limousines? But was it love or calculation? The answer lies in the documents. April 14, 1983, 39 days before Seward's death. Attorney Nina Zagat enters the bedroom. She's not the old family lawyer who handled affairs for decades. She's loyal to Basha. A new document is brought for Seward's signature. This isn't the first change. During his marriage to Basha, Seward changed the will dozens of times. But this time is fatal. In this document, Seward practically disinherits his children. He also defunds his beloved Oceanographic Institute, Harbor Branch, the work of his life. The entire estate, stocks, real estate, art, cash, passes to Barbara Piasecka Johnson. The amount, $400 to $500 million. Did he sign this in his right mind? Or was his hand guided by fear of dying alone? Seward is weak. He can barely hold the pen. The ink on paper records not just asset transfer but the final severing of generational ties. May 23, 1983. J. Seward Johnson I dies in the room Basha furnished with such luxury. The funeral is surreal. Elite society gathers. The children stand by the coffin with stone faces. The widow, dressed in black, looks not broken but majestic. Conflict hangs thick as fog. No one cries. Everyone awaits the will. And when that moment arrives, it thunders like a gunshot. New York Circuit's Court, Lower Manhattan. For 17 weeks, the jury listens to the story of a great dynasty's moral decay. On one side, Seward's 4 children with their army of lawyers from Sullivan and Cromwell. On the other, Barbara Piasecka Johnson, defended by elite firm Milbank Tweed. If conflicts were once hidden behind Yasna Polana's walls, now they're broadcast nationwide. The children's lawyers paint Basha as a monster, yelling at Seward, calling him a stupid old man, isolating him from the world. They describe Yasna Polana not as a home but as a silk-upholstered torture chamber. Beja's defense strikes back. The children are greedy vultures who ignored their father for years and only remembered him when it was time to divide money. Basha was the only one who cared for Seward as he died of cancer and incontinence. Legal costs reach $24 million. Only the lawyers emerge as winners. June 1986. The jury retires. Tension is unbearable. Both sides know the verdict could go either way, Russian roulette. If the jury deems Seward incompetent, Basha loses everything. If competent, the children get nothing. Fear of loss proves stronger than hatred. While the jury deliberates, the lawyers strike a deal. The terms stun Wall Street. Barbara Piasecka Johnson retains over $300 million, plus Yasna Polana and the art collection. The children receive about $40 million split 4 ways, a drop in the ocean but enough to save face. Harbor Branch gets $20 million. Basha appears to have won. But returning to empty Yasna Polana, she realizes the terrible irony: she won a house impossible to live in. Maintaining Yasna Polana costs millions yearly, taxes, security, heating, climate control for paintings. It's a financial black hole. The house built as a monument to love has become a monument to extravagance. Too large for one person. Too cold. Too steeped in memories of trials and death. And here occurs a psychological transformation. Basha, who bought art to prove greatness, begins getting rid of things. In 1990, she auctions furniture and decor, chairs, tables, carpets, for millions. But what to do with the house itself? The decision she makes is pragmatic and symbolic: she opens the gates. In the mid-1990s, she turns the fortress into an elite golf club. Golfer Gary Player designs the course on lawns where lonely Seward once walked. The mansion where Raphael and Botticelli hung becomes a clubhouse. Rooms where the patriarch died now host wealthy golfers. This is transcendence through commercialization. Basha realizes holding on to greatness alone is impossible. The only way to preserve the house is to give it to people, even for a membership fee. While Basha seeks redemption in Europe through philanthropy, a new generation grows up in America, including Casey Johnson, daughter of Seward Jr. The money they fought over so fiercely in 1986 flows to grandchildren. And this stream is poisonous. Casey is born with every advantage: wealth, access, a famous name. But she's born without love, without stability, without purpose. She becomes a tabloid fixture: partying, relationships with celebrities, erratic behavior. And then, January 4, 2010, we return full circle to that cold bungalow in Los Angeles where Casey's body is found. Now, knowing the story of Yasna Polana, of betrayal and trials and $30 million spent on marble, we see this death differently. This isn't an accident. This is a direct consequence of that 1986 battle. The money that killed Casey came from the trust her father fought for. If the Johnson family had spent a tenth of the energy from lawsuits on raising and emotionally supporting their children, Casey would be alive. The symbolism reaches its peak: Casey Johnson dies of diabetes. Johnson & Johnson is the world leader in glucometers and insulin pumps. She had access to the best doctors on the planet. But she lacked the main thing, a reason to live and people who would notice she'd stopped answering calls. Barbara Piasecka Johnson outlived her husband by exactly 30 years. She died April 1, 2013, at age 76, not in America or Monaco, but in Poland, in Wrocław, the city of her youth. The circle closed. The girl with $100 who became one of the world's richest women finally understood native soil matters more than marble palaces. Her legacy is as contradictory as she was. In Poland, she's a national heroine and patron. In America, she's remembered as the maid who stole an old man's heart and wallet. But the main monument to this story still stands in Princeton. Today, if you drive to 4821 Roosevelt Road, you won't see closed gates of a private residence. You'll see a sign, TPC Jasna Polana. The former home of Seward and Basha is now one of America's most prestigious private golf clubs. This is the final irony. The house built as a sanctuary of art and seclusion is now a commercial enterprise. Where Raphael's canvases hung, tournament boards now hang. In the dining room where hundreds of millions were decided, club sandwiches are now served to tired bankers. The grand staircase Seward descended in his final days now serves as backdrop for strangers' wedding photos. We see three layers here. Architectural tragedy, the attempt to replace human warmth with square footage. Seward thought building a house worthy of a king would make him one. He remained just a frightened man in rooms too large. Familial tragedy, the conflict between old money and new energy. Seward's children believed money belonged to them by birthright. Basha believed money belongs to those who care for it. Everyone lost. The children got money but lost their father, and ultimately themselves, as Casey's fate showed. Philosophical tragedy, this is a story about legacy that cannot be bought. Robert Wood Johnson I left behind a company that saves lives. His grandson Seward left behind the most expensive court case in history and a house that became a golf course. In a world where we constantly strive for accumulation, the Johnson story serves as a cold shower. It reminds us that success, the amount in your account, and legacy, what remains in people's hearts, are completely different currencies. The Johnson dynasty created products that heal wounds on skin but failed to heal wounds inside their own family. Today, when you take a jar of baby powder or pack of Band-Aids with the red Johnson & Johnson logo, remember this story. Remember the empty pool in Hollywood. Remember the old man dying in a $30 million room. Remember the woman who won everything but died far from the house she built. True value isn't what we own. It's who holds our hand in the last minute. Seward had Basha's hand, but that hand cost him his relationship with his children. Casey Johnson had no one's hand. Jasna Polana still stands, shining with limestone in the New Jersey sun, beautiful, majestic, and absolutely indifferent to those who created it. Stone doesn't know how to love. That's the privilege of the living. And it's the only wealth that cannot be litigated in court.